All right, so let's talk about REST APIs. We all use REST APIs. We all deal with them almost on a daily basis. Some of us create or maintain multiple ones every single day, especially here at Booking. And what are they, basically? These APIs allow us to access either read or change, create, delete, whatever, resources on a remote server from the client point of view. And we're doing it in those ways. First, we have very simple URLs to point to those resources. Those tell us where they are on the remote side. And of course, we can also have some query parameters to redefine the query or what we exactly what we want, but this is just how we point to a specific resource. And we pass some JSON or some other serialized body for the request to basically pass the data to the other side. It's either on the request if we create a resource or in the response when we get something back. Now, do we have a format in which this JSON is sent? No, this is basically the problem that we're trying to deal with. There is what I refer to as a missing layer in the communication between the client and the server when we are doing this. We know exactly how every other layer in the stack works, like how IP or the HTTP itself is formatted, and somewhere between the HTTP and the application, sometimes if you have a web framework like Denser or some inferior one, you will have the framework already deserialize the JSON for you, so you will at least know that the body contains a JSON, but otherwise you have to do it yourself. And even if you have the JSON as deserialized JSON, you still need to know what's in it. Like, the client needs to know how the server formats the body, and the client and the server needs to know how the client passes JSON when it creates resources. This leads to some redundant interaction between client-side and server-side developers, in this case, where we do a lot of arguing over how we do it. We do a lot of bike shedding in the sense that we are wasting a lot of time on this. And we're just doing the same thing over and over, and it's redundant. What we want to do is, we want to focus on what we're passing. We don't want to focus on how we're passing it. And this just takes too much time, and we're doing it every time in a slightly different way, and we have to remember all the time for which project, how did we do it, and how to maintain it, and it's a bit of a pain. To get it structured, we need a protocol. Luckily, Stephen found one. It's called Json API. You can look up the spec. Not right now, please. I can maybe show you. Sorry, this is not what I wanted to do, but no, this is not what I wanted to do. So.
In the meantime, can I ask you something?
Yes, sure.
Are you familiar with HAL, Hypertext Application Language?
Sorry?
Hypertext Application Language.
Yes. What about it?
Oh, you're familiar with it?
No. But
oh, okay. Yeah, it's similar to this in the sense that...
I think there are a couple of specs out there. This specific one was...
Oh. Just want to rinse.
So this specific one, this is the website, some bits of the spec. The spec tells us exactly how the requests and responses and some error codes should be when we are communicated. It really defines everything in a very, very specific way. Oh, I didn't go back. Sorry. Meant to do this. And it was written by a bunch of guys who are, some are code devs in the Rust project as far as I know, and others that I don't know exactly what they do, but they saw the problem. They were very surprised that the namespace JSON API wasn't taken for anything, and they used that. There is a bit of a joke on the logo itself. It's supposed to be JSON, but it's an invalid one. Do read the spec if you want to see what everything is about, but if you use it, what I show, you probably won't have to. What's the benefit of using a protocol, a spec? First, JSON API has multiple implementations. I won't go back to the website, but you can see it there. There are many implementations in many different languages. There was none in Perl. We created the first one, which is what we're going to talk about. That means that you can plug your server to, basically, when you create a server, you can have any of those clients use your server, communicate with your server. They can be in JavaScript, they can be in Python, they can be in Ruby, whatever. Same goes for the other side. You can use a client to communicate with multiple servers at the same time. You know how to send the requests, and you know what you will get back as responses. Yes?
Is there a public test suite to test your implementation against?
I want to say yes, but the answer is no. This is an issue that was discussed on their forum, and I think someone is in the process of building something. Some of the existing implementations may have some tests to cover the spec. For the current spec version, I don't think they have one, but I'm pretty sure they will come up with something soon enough.
Okay.
It is being discussed. So this is how you request a resource from a JSON API server. It's very much the same. The only difference is just that you have to supply a header that will tell the server that you are speaking in that language, so it knows how to respond to you. Makes sense. In this case, it's a GET request, so we only need to supply an accept. We don't have the content. And when we ask for this resource, we will get something like that. This is already processed by data printer, so it's not JSON that you see, but it's a valid JSON. Otherwise, the JSON PP would explode. So what you can see here, and I'm sorry I cannot point to the specific places on the screen because I don't see it, but you can see that every response for a resource will have the data which contains the resource itself. This can be a hash or an array of resources if we ask for more. Every resource will have an ID and type. This is the identifier that tells us exactly where the resource is, and you can see that there are links that also point to it and everything. Attributes are just like any other fields that you have in, let's say, a table that contain more information about this attribute. And we have the relationship part, which basically tells us how this resource is related to other resources on other types or other tables. You will see later that we can also pull resources based on that relationship. You can see there is the version that's also being passed there, and self-link, which can be relative or full path URL. In this example, it's the same one, just or not the same one. It's asking for another type of resource. It's an article, but I also use a query parameter. In this case, it's include that tells me that I don't only want the article resource itself. I also want the resources that are related to it. So here, the response is broken into a few images because it was a bit long. So you can see that I get the resource. This is the article that I asked for. Then I have the relationships, which tell me what relationships exist for this resource. In this case, just an author, but we can have multiple ones, or we can have multiple types of relationships. And there is another section called included. This is outside the data. This will contain the resources that are related that we asked for by type. So when we said include authors, we will see the resource of the author also attached to this response. This is just a more complicated example, but there are many other filters and some other parameters that we can apply here to get exactly what we want from the data, from the server. And now, PONAPI. So, PONAPI is our implementation. It's basically, it's two implementations. We have two distributions is one for server and one for a client. It's an open source project that we did here in Booking. It's available both on CPAN as distributions for PONAPI server, PONAPI controls server and client. People who worked on this project are Stephen Little, who's the visionary and the one who defined the borders before we ran forward. Brian Fraser, who did most of the heavy lifting and wrote most of the tests and manual and the connection to the repository. And myself, who mostly did removal of trading white spaces.
It's important. And convert tabs.
Yeah, exactly. It's on GitHub as well. You can look at it later if you want to participate in some in the project itself. So on the server side, it's just a plaque-based server. So you can just run it as you run any PSGI server. You can mount it. You can play with it. There are some parameters that you can also pass to the creation of the object to run over some of the configurations, but no. Well, it is necessary unless you want to run with the demo repository. But this is the pain. The only thing that you really need to do is to plug your repository to PONAPI, which means that you have to build or to have a class that has a set of few, I don't think it's too many, but a few methods that basically map all the CRUD operations and a few other things that you may do if you want to, or at least have an empty subroutine for them, like for relationships and things like that. And then you just put it either in the configuration or pass it as a variable to the object. And basically, that's all you need to do. You run it, it works. As long as we can access the data through that object, everything is going to work out of the box. On the other side, we have a client, also a separate distribution on CPAN, which just wraps the whole examples that you saw before with curl. You can just have a client with all the parameters and everything that you can pass on a request. You can just use the client interface, which is what we're doing internally when we're using this thing. In this example, this is exactly the same response because it's just the same data print of the same resource that came back from the server. So it can be like a completely different screen capture, but you can see exactly the same data for the same resource through the client as with the Chrome. And we have many other features implemented there. As I said, you can pass all sorts of parameters. We have a very long and thorough manual. It explains everything you need to do in order to get this up and running. Code examples, everything that you will need is up there. Just check PONAPI manual. And on the GitHub repository, if you want to communicate with us on any issues that you may have, we get those, we respond very quickly. Yesterday I got an issue opened, and about 10 minutes later I released another version with a fix to a bug that was reported. PRs are welcome if you want to participate, if you want to look into the code and contribute, that's also great. That is all I have for now. So if you have any questions, I'm sure you have. Go for it. Ooh, many hands. Yeah, let's go left to right. Yeah, you raise your hand, sure.
So where does the name come from?
The
name.
Oh, the name. Yeah, that's a slide I dropped from the presentation. Yeah, so Json API is one word on the URL of the Json API website. We spent about half an hour bike shedding over the name. How are we going to name this? We couldn't come up with good names. My argument was, I'm very bad at naming. Stephen was saying the same, and he gave Moose as an example, so I couldn't argue with him. So we just took Json API, and because JS stands for JavaScript, and this is a Perl implementation, we just removed the JS and put a Perl P instead. So even though Perl object notation doesn't mean anything, we just like the naming. It sounds funny. It sounds like what? Like an Italian dish.
A wonderful Italian dish.
So,
I had the most wonderful PONAPI last
PONAPI.
Right.
Okay, exactly. So that's the story behind the name, and thank you for bringing that up. I forgot to put it in the slides. Definitely something that's worth mentioning. Any other questions? Everything was about the name.
Was on my right. Yeah, just wanted to know if you had other features like schema, validation, data query language, pagination. Are you planning to add that if you don't?
Pagination, so many, yes to some of those. Basically, everything that the spec defines, we allow, as in we pass the request or the request parameters to the repository. Now, you have to remember that if you use it, you have to write the repository, right? You are the owner of the repository. You need to respond to those requests, right?
Yeah, but
to do something with
so pagination, it's not defined on their specification.
Pagination was.
Isn't pagination an extension? Or is it?
It's not an extension. It's but it's something that only the repository can do. We can pass parameters that relate to the pagination. The spec defines how we do that. We will tell you which page we want, like the offset and or the page number or whatever. But the repository needs to do something.
I get that, but I mean, in terms of presentation, you have that. That's all I mean, you can send it in the query and then you can get it back in the body.
Yes.
And then, of course, the logic behind it.
Yes, and there is a definition of a member key in the document that is being sent that is specially for that. And pagination can happen on multiple places there, because you have the data section. So if you're asking for multiple resources, you may have pagination on the data, but you can also have pagination on the include part where you have the related resources. So or even on links. I think pagination is valid almost everywhere. So you need to know what you're doing when you're dealing with that thing. But yes, we support passing those query parameters down to your repository object. Yes.
On that subject, I'm not familiar with this API too much. Is there a part in the spec that allows you to describe, for instance, I want to create an article, so there's a post for that.
Yeah.
Is there a way that I can describe how that would, with an example or something in
Yes.
JSON format?
Yes.
It
There
does.
is,
Excellent.
there is a section in their website called examples.
Great.
You can see exactly how to do that, and of course we have well, I would say in the tests, but we can support that. So basically, you don't if you want to use our client for that, you can pass. You can just call, instead of retrieve in this example, you just call create and pass the data that you want.
No, I wondered if there was like
The spec defines it. Yes,
the
absolutely.
standard to write these things, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is why the spec is there. I mean, the spec defines exactly how you do things. It will also tell you what you will get back, so you can understand the response that the server sends to you when you create an object. Because it can be, okay, this resource was created, or this resource will be created later, like the 2.0 something, or all sorts of different responses that you need to be able to read. So if
Right.
you use like a conventional client, it will already know that and will handle this for you. But if you write your own, then yes, the spec will tell you exactly how to do that.
Thanks.
Is there supporting the API for discovery of what data is in the server, or what types of data are there in the server?
Types of data, I don't think the spec.
To discover the schema, basically.
I don't think the spec.
Or is
deals
that out of
with-
the spec?
The spec doesn't deal with it at all. Potentially, what you can do is you can support it outside of the spec. Like you can support it on the same mounting point, but with a different content type or something like that. You know, or have a separate mounting point to list those things. But it's not something that the spec deals with. Maybe in future versions, like because this is an implementation of spec version 1.0 as it is.
Okay.
This is the latest stable spec. When they release 1.1 or 1.2, we'll just move forward and implement that. But and there are some other features that are not there yet, which will be in the next that are coming. Also, there are extensions, which I didn't mention, but the spec supports extensions, which some of them are official, and some of them you can write your own. And then you just pass to the media type. You just add some parameters that say, oh, this request also uses some extension, and if the server supports that one, it will do something else. So this is another way to implement the same thing through like within the spec, basically. One extension that is worth mentioning is the bulk changes one. It's called bulk. This extension equals bulk. It allows bulk fetching, and bulk fetching is already there because we have a filter, so we can filter by IDs. But bulk updates or bulk creation of resources, we already have that implemented and it works. But the whole extension negotiation is not yet well defined in the spec. So every time we send them some questions about how to do things that have to do with the extensions, they just said sit and wait until we finalize this, because this whole thing is going to be completely changed very soon. So we have a branch ready, and as soon as they finish this part, and it's just a negotiation, which is very simple, we're just going to release something that supports it.
Okay.
For now, you can still do your own extensions. Like,
Are you familiar with CouchDB?
with
CouchDB.
Couch.
It's a file database. It has a similar API, but it predates a lot of the modern REST APIs. So
This is not reinventing anything. It just tries to put a lot of like commonly used.
Sure. But in particular, I'm curious about how you might handle like binary attachments or binary data. CouchDB does it one of two ways. It either lets you, it sends you a URL in your response that lets you download, or it will base 64 encode it, which of course isn't very efficient for large data sets.
Yeah. For now, the current spec version does not deal with binary data, and if you go on their forum and search for any questions related to binary data, they will say just create a custom extension for it for now. They will probably add it later. This whole spec is just, so you understand, it's also very new and evolving. So it's not something that is or well established and we're just going to implement it. Like, just go and implement something that's already widely used, but we're trying to go with them at the same time, and we're also feeding them back with questions and comments, and they're very responsive and fixing things based on just like, you want a clarification on why the spec says this or that. They usually like immediately change that just to make it clearer.
A second question, if I'm not hogging the time.
Don't worry, I have
How much does JSON API interact with like HTTP headers, it's like setting an E-tag and expiration date times and stuff like that, or is it purely on the lower parallel on this?
Again, expiration, I don't think it's something like expiration or authorization. Some of those things are mentioned as we need to discuss this. Like these are like open issues, but there are solutions for it because there are some parts of the spec that says, I didn't show it, but you can pass also a meta clause in your JSON. In that, it's like a free form JSON that you can put whatever you want. So you can pass like meta expiration and whatever value, and if your client knows to read that, then you have no problem.
Sure.
Of course, we don't want everything to go through the meta because then we just bypass the whole thing. And as soon as this will be part of the spec, we will want it to be where it's supposed to be. But there are ways to do it now using this. And for us, it's easier because we control both the client and the server that we use. Of course, if you do it on your server, not every client will be able to speak with your server, right? That's going to be a problem.
Would that be part of HTTP already?
It is. I'm just wondering if it's. I mean, sometimes it may, like with.
I mean, if it's a header, you can pass it.
Closely integrated.
If it's a header, you can
Yeah,
pass
but
it.
JSON API just doesn't, it doesn't do anything
It
specific.
has no knowledge of that, so you can certainly use it.
Yeah.
But on your own level.
We also use headers to pass some other information outside of the spec that is related specifically for PONAPI. One example is like our client, because of the way we read parameters, will do double escaping just so we can split by the comma, like do double URL escaping. So we also pass a header from the client to the server that tells it that we do that, so it will know to double decode it. So things like that. But we do it through headers. We don't mess with the spec. We don't want to break other clients.
Sure.
Yes.
Is PONAPI listed on the JSON API project page?
Yes. If you go to the implementations, let me do that because this is the best part.
This question was scripted.
So here, implementation.
Oh yeah, there it is.
There is a Perl thing. I'm sorry, I cannot see anything. You will see, this is for clients. You will see that there is a
First of all,
yeah, the first one. Well,
wow.
The only one in the Perl.
the only, yeah, it is the only implementation in Perl. And for server, of course, we also have. And we have links there to the CPAN, meta CPAN page where those are.
Standing across the center page of all those useful languages.
Yeah.
Right? Any other questions?
Nice work.
Nice.
Thank you very much.